Hi, I'm LoRusso. I wanted to take a moment to talk to you about qualified immunity. You've heard a lot about qualified immunity in the past several months. People who can't spell qualified immunity are now experts in it. So let's take a second and talk about what it is and what it isn't. Qualified immunity is a legal concept, and that legal concept is created to provide immunity to public officials, not just law enforcement officers, public officials who are performing jobs in the course and scope of their duties. Now, first of all, it's a concept that has been created by legislatures, supported by legislatures, and also supported and created and modified by courts. So first and foremost, a lot of public officials have some type of immunity. As a matter of fact, prosecutors and legislators and judges have absolute immunity. Their immunity is absolute when they are performing their jobs during the course and scope of their employment. Qualified immunity means that the immunity has to go through an analysis, essentially, and it's extended to other public officials other than the ones I just mentioned, including police officers and law enforcement officers performing acts that the public expects them to do. All right, first of all, here's what qualified immunity does not affect. Qualified immunity does not affect an injunction. If you seek an injunction against a police department for doing something improper, such as keeping journalists from filming police officers at the scene of a protest, that does not get you qualified immunity. Second, qualified immunity, as I said, has to do with public officials, let's talk about law enforcement officers, performing sworn duties, the duties within the course and scope of their employment, and therefore, it does not cover criminal acts. By definition, it does not cover criminal acts. So if an officer performs a criminal act, even if they are in uniform, they do not get qualified immunity. In fact, courts go through a detailed analysis before they provide qualified immunity. So this notion that people file a lawsuit against the police and they raise the qualified immunity flag and then they throw them out of court is just absolute, utter nonsense. So let's talk about how that happens. Somebody sues a law enforcement officer or some sort of a public official. A court, if qualified immunity is raised, it's a defense that has to be raised, goes through an in-depth analysis. And I'll tell you how in-depth it is. There have been cases where an officer has deployed a taser multiple times on a suspect, and the court has said, these 2 or 3 taser deployments are okay. You get qualified immunity as to those. This other one, we're not going to extend qualified immunity. Same thing with hand strikes. Same thing with any type of use of an impact weapon. Same thing with gunfire. It happens. In fact, we looked at 252 appellate court cases, 252 appellate court cases, and qualified immunity was extended in only 53% of those cases. So it is far from a given and it is far from absolute. The officer has to apply for it and the courts analyze it. Now, here is where it is being abused. People are saying law enforcement officers have qualified immunity to people who are treated poorly by law enforcement and treated in an unlawful manner don't have access to our courts. Absolutely 100% nonsense. A lot of these cases that you hear being settled, especially with large settlements, those are settled before suits ever filed. So qualified immunity has absolutely nothing to do with that. Cases are thrown out of court based on qualified immunity when courts wrestle with this issue. And we go back to Graham versus Connor when we analyze this. The courts said so eloquently in that case that law enforcement officers are called upon to do jobs that the public needs them to do, wants them to do, and they do so under tense, uncertain, and rapidly evolving circumstances. So qualified immunity essentially allows the people who step up and take that oath to be able to do their jobs, and if they act appropriately based on current existing law, and they follow what the courts have said, and they don't violate the law, they don't break any criminal laws, and they follow past precedent, then they will have relief from a lawsuit filed against them. And that is what qualified immunity is. It has been blown out of proportion and people are not being honest about what it is. So now you have some talking points, and I hope you'll support qualified immunity for public safety officers especially. Thanks.